So there is a dirty little secret about this show that Kumo and I keep from you, and that is the cars we feature here are generally either at the very beginning of their life cycle or at the midpoint after a refresh. We usually don't feature a car towards the end of its life cycle. However, when something has a lot of horsepower, is in an obnoxious color, and is the equation of a British sports car, perhaps we should make an exception. So this is quite a departure from an inline XK6, 5-liter V8 with a supercharger, 575 horsepower, 516 pound-feet of torque. The only option is to drive all four wheels, yes, even in a two-seat sports car. Then the fuel economy is not horrific. Well, in town it kind of is. 16, 24, 18 combined. And then there are the performance figures, which this is all about. 0 to 60, 3.5 seconds, and VMAX, 186 miles an hour. So I'm going to take this opportunity to apologize in advance for the many 911 references you will most likely hear throughout this entire episode. Because yes, I'm a bit of a Porsche guy if you didn't know. And then there is the fact that this is a direct competitor. And with that, the weight is not too much more than a 911 with similar power and an all-wheel drive system at 3,843 pounds, or depending on express weights and measures, 1,743 kilograms. With that, we are in what Jaguar calls dynamic mode. Oh, wow! That is old world power! Damn, that thing comes in, it comes in fast! It wakes up around 2,500 RPM, but then there's an on-off switch of more torque at about 3,500 RPM. God, this is an old world vehicle. There is a certain amount of charm to this thing. Anyway, that on-off switch comes in around 3,500 RPM, pulls all the way up to about 5,000 RPM, and God, is it good. Now, oh my God, did you hear that thing? This thing barks at you. Granted, I have not driven a Jaguar in a very long time. Wow, that is a good exhaust. Anyway, the transmission, it is virtually the same that we've driven in all those BMWs. It's a ZF 8-speed, so a torque converter transmission. Here it works okay. I don't really love shifting the gears manual in this thing. I would love this engine to have a dual clutch and have more mechanical shifts. It's not as reassuring, maybe reassuring is the wrong term. I'd say not in line with the personality of that engine. It's kind of old world, it makes wonderful noises. Now there's something else you may not think is related to that engine and transmission combination, particularly sport exhaust, and that would be the glass roof. You think it's there to make the interior more light and airy, open up a small car. That would not be the case. Now granted, Jaguar will never admit to this, but my guess is that glass has different sound properties and it changes the interior to be an echo chamber for that exhaust. And I have to say, it's a neat trick that works incredibly well. Now before Jaguar got into the business of copying Land Rovers, which for the life of me I still do not understand, they all had a very specific look to them, at least to me. Long hood, short deck, very organic, but unlike classic German cars, more svelte. This was a very good interpretation of classic Jaguar design, especially the proportions. Now, I would argue this probably one of Ian Callum's more successful modern designs. That said, the first iteration of this design had lights that did pick up, at least spiritually, from a Jaguar E-Type. Then they made some changes about a year and a half ago that I can see what they were going for here, but it really doesn't add to the car. Granted, the overall proportions are still there. The rear still looks kind of like a Jaguar, actually more like an E-Type in terms of at least the lights. Yet the front, I would argue it's the first generation, the first half of this generation that is more successful in keeping the Jaguar design ethos alive. Underpinnings here, pretty good. Double wishbones all the way around, and they do a good job of controlling all planes of motion, particularly pitch. Now, something rather unusual here is the delta between the drive modes. So it's got the differing drive modes like pretty much any other car like this. However, driving it around town, I gotta say I didn't love it. The drive mode, it's too it's too soft. The characteristic is different, the personality is different. So I wasn't expecting to have this much fun on the road out here, but God, is it good when it's in dynamic mode. Now, something that really kind of works hand in hand with that, and that is the wheelbase here. Again, another reference to a 911. It's about 7 inches longer in wheelbase, and you do notice that really in 2 areas. Number one, you kind of feel like you're driving Cruella de Vil's car because you're sitting all the way in the back of the car, practically on the rear axle. And then number 2, the steering. So remember, you got those 2 different drive modes. The steering, it was no good feedback. It didn't have enough weight to it, wasn't direct enough in comfort. But when it gets into this dynamic mode, it's got good feedback. It's very direct. The weight could use a bit of tuning there. But other than that, the combination of the additional wheelbase over the 911 here does a really good job of making this thing a missile you kind of point and shoot. And that in turn brings up an incredibly important point, the all-wheel drive system. I can't honestly tell you I noticed the all-wheel drive system here. However, after driving this thing, even for a couple of minutes on this road, I can completely see why Jaguar makes this engine and this transmission combination only on offer in the US with all-wheel drive. Because the reality is, this is the kind of car one would need to know car control. If they didn't, you would launch yourself over there with this kind of power going around turns. Then we press on to an area that the folks in the Midlands are not screwing around with, and that would be the brakes. Here up front, 15-inch diameter rotors. In the rear, 14.8. For the avoidance of doubt, my Pontiac Fiero had smaller wheels than the back brakes of this car, and they work incredibly well. Good pedal modulation, a lot of stopping power, which is really required here because this thing, it can get squirrely on you. This thing has a hairy chest, and it does not mind showing it to you. And now we're at the point of the episode where I feel it prudent to share something rather personal with you. I am most likely the last person on planet Earth to drive a Jaguar F-Type, and it's not because I don't like British cars. You guys know I'm a freak for British cars. I've owned many British sports cars. So I had kind of a preconceived notion before getting into this thing, and I'm happy to report it exceeds my expectations. And no, not because it's perfect. It's far less than perfect, but that's part of its charm. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game on the Options Game with today's contestant, what I believe to be the first ever Jaguar we are featuring in a round of this game. This one, the 2021 Jaguar F-Type R all-wheel drive coupe for a base price of $103,200. To that, we add the color. Now, yes, one could consider this obnoxious, but on this car, I have to admit, it looks incredible. However, one doesn't select just Sorrento Yellow Metallic. Instead, one must select the Special Vehicle Operations Ultra Metallic paint, specifically in high gloss, for $4,550. Then one can have Sorrento Yellow Metallic. To that, we add the fixed panoramic sunroof with a sunshade. Why is this optional on a $103,000 car? $1,175. Then the climate pack. This consists of the 2-zone climate control, the heated steering wheel and heated mirrors, $1,125. Again, why is this optional on a $103,000 car? Then the 20-inch gray 5 split-spoke wheels. They look good with yellow, well worth the $1,100. Then kind of a bargain, the Meridian sound system, $870, not the usual $4 or $5 grand that we get charged over at Porsche. And then we already paid, what, $1,125 for that climate pack. We have to pay more for climate, the heated and cooled seats, that's an additional $800. Then black brake calipers are optional. Black, I can understand red, maybe yellow, but black, $510? Let's fix that. Then the blind spot assist pack, that is $500. And then, believe it or not, a garage door opener is optional on a $103,000 car, $255. Now, based on that last option, may I suggest you guys never again leave me nasty comments about Porsche and the Options Game. Pressing on to the only other thing we have to pay extra for, that is the destination and handling from Castle Bromwich, United Kingdom, $1,025 for a total suggested retail price of $115,110. I may have owned too many Lotuses in my time, but as of late, I have been far too spoiled by the Interiors von Zuffenhausen, and as such, I don't love what's going on here. Yeah, the color is bad. Black is just a bad choice. The fit and finish ain't great. Yeah, there's some leather on the dash and the doors, which helps a lot, and I gotta believe that's something to do with the R model. But everything else, it just isn't befitting that of a car we just discussed in the options game. And then there's the overall design of it. I do not like the pop-up air vents. There's a rattle coming from that area of the car. I'm gathering that's only gonna get worse as the car ages. And then there's the screen. The angle of the screen, I can't see it in direct sunlight. Like even indirect sunlight, I really can't see it. That's something that really needs to change. The things that I like, the toggle switches are magnificent. There's a real volume knob, thank you very much. The steering wheel could use a bit of a thicker rim. Maybe you should consult the folks in Munich and get them to share some of the tricks and how they put steering wheels in M cars. That said, my friends in the Midlands do make up for some of those transgressions with the seats. They're either made directly by the folks at Recaro or they're really good copies. And usually good support in the seat back, could use a little bit of help with the seat bottom. But what's really going on here is identity with the color and trim. This is a car that should stand out, especially when it's yellow, and we paid a lot of extra money for that yellow paint. Why not have like a unique two-tone interior with more soft touch, contrast stitch, and colored seat belts? That's what this really needs and would go a long way to making up for some of the transgressions of the fit and finish. I had to spend some time reflecting on how to convey the following. This is a wonderful combination between like an old school TVR and a really good Corvette C7. And that kind of tells you everything about the car. While good, the world around it has leapfrogged over it. You see, this came out before there was even the concept of a new 992 or the concept of a new C8. And then when you consider $115,000, I'd have an incredibly hard time spending that kind of money on this when one could buy a very basic 992, a Cayman GT4, or save 30 grand and get a well-equipped Corvette, which frankly has a nicer interior than this. And that brings us to the wish list. And this, it's not focused on this generation of car, rather the car that is going to replace it. Yeah, I could ask for specific things like some electrification, which would be great, as well as maybe a GT3 version of it, meaning two-wheel drive, manual transmission. That would be great. However, I'm simply saying, look at what the competition is doing, specifically in fit and finish, color and trim, and different options. Take some of that learning from the C8, apply it here, and then maybe change some tech, like the 48-volt system that's already in the Land Rover, bring it over here, but tune it for performance, not for efficiency or off-road, and you'd really have something that would stand out in today's world, not the world of like 4 or 5 years ago. And this is the point of the episode where I turn this around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MOTOMAN TV, all one word, MOTOMAN TV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I do want to leave you with one thing. Yes, we did experience some challenges in looking at a car that's more towards the end of its life cycle. However, at least for me, it was lovely to go back home again and be behind the wheel of a British sports car, and one that doesn't have plastic body panels and slightly more powerful than something that has a Rover K-Series. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.